I spent over 10 years exploring them by meeting scientists, by reading, and also by bearing witness. I've been to the Arctic, Antarctic, and places like that, where there are glaciers melting, including Montana Glacier National Park. In 2018, I had the opportunity to switch gears, which I've been wanting to do because I was very concerned about reefs, coral reefs, which were being bleached throughout the world, and the oceans, which do represent about 70% of the globe. I was fortunate enough to be invited to be part of a team who got a grant to go to American Samoa. And before we did that, we started in Hawaii. At that time, I was also scheduled for a big show at the National Academy of Sciences, which originally was going to be just about glaciers. That's what I had been doing. When the director heard I was going also to switch gears a bit, he said, this was, I was like, oh, we could include some of those, and it really freaked me out because I had no idea at that moment in time what I was going to make. I didn't know what the paint experience would be like. So basically, but here we have a studio shot of the spring after I got back from this really incredible experience. And indeed, I was into this whole period. And also to the right, you can see I was also beginning to be into lenticulars, time-based media. Next slide. That work evolved so that it was in the National Academy show. I think it opened in August of 2018. It ran through January of 2019. But I continued to work with coral reef imagery throughout that time. And by the spring, close to the summer, I was already involved in another project. I always like to talk about my whole studio practice as being a serendipitous one. My life is kind of that way, actually. Things happen, I'm open to change, and I think that's a great way to be, and I think most artists actually are that way. In my studio, I found two 50 by 88 blank canvases, and I got the idea that I wanted to do these horizontal formats with a frieze along the top. It began with the painting all the way to the right, which was a map, a world map, and this is called my world map series. It began with a world map of reefs, but I also did a whole series about glaciers. One canvas led to another, and I kept ordering more canvases because I only had two to begin with. This whole series became a 56-foot long series, which hopefully, as Brooke mentioned, will be shown at the American University Museum in the fall of 2021. So they're still planning on it. Actually, I heard from Jack Rasmussen recently that it's going to go the whole semester, which wasn't the original plan, but that's how museums are, changing their whole schedule to accommodate budgets. Up next, please. Well, we're moving right into February of 2020. That was quick, right? This wall shows work that I was doing actually in the fall of 2019. You might remember the summer of 2019 was very hot, and I'm always into what's going on in terms of the climate and how CO2 is affecting the atmosphere, et cetera. And at that time, I also have a lot of good friends in Europe, and they were writing to me about the horrendous heat wave, especially in France, where I had lived once before. And I was looking at maps. As you could tell by my world map series, I'm very into maps. So I started by doing a horizontal painting that was 60 by 84 of the map that showed the heat wave. Yet when I finished it, or almost finished it, I put it aside because I thought it was just way too literal. So I put it away, and then I went back to another group of paintings I was doing called a NOAA Coral series. And there's a coral watch that goes on every single day out of NOAA. And I know the director, we were on a panel together, and I started making a series of 42 by 42 inch paintings. The top left one is part of that series. And of course, all this is on my website. But you might remember in the summer and then the fall of 2019, there also were those horrendous fires in Australia with over a billion animals eliminated. And that was working on me. And so I had a 42 by 42 blank canvas. And so I started making the one on the left, and I really thought it was going to be a horizontal diptych. That's what it was originally. Then I decided to put one on top of the other. And then I added up 42 plus 42 equals 84, which meant that I could turn that other painting horizontally, which I did. Next slide. And there it is in a more complete way this past March. And of course, I added another panel. I had a 60 by 84 on hand. And so what I mean by serendipitous is things just grow. Now, the final piece, the two diptychs are sort of moved over to the left and the other two are bolted together. You might notice there's another painting way out there, and that was Coral Triangle, which I had been working on as well. After I finished this one, next slide, I realized that Coral Triangle needed more. And so I added another panel. And this is, I guess, the first time I've really used text in such a bold way. You know, 85% of reefs in the Coral Triangle are threatened. It seemed after I did this angry, emotional painting about summer heat, I just felt I had to be more outspoken, although I've always worried or been concerned about the balance between message and aesthetics. And I am a painter, and I just believe that I always have to hold on to my values as a painter in terms of all the things I learned way back last century. And so I tried to bring it up to the present. Next slide. And the present is really now, and the topic today, which Brooke wanted both Sarah and I to talk about, how are we dealing with COVID? I don't know how I'm dealing with it. And you can tell by seeing this series of paintings that goes for almost 2 months. It keeps changing, and the paintings keep changing, and they keep evolving. Because we had only 6 images, Brooke, thank you so much for this idea. I composited time in one image. And so April 23rd, I already had been working on this painting for a while. It started with a map, 2 42 by 42s, the map of America. And also that red painting on the, actually the left painting was the first one I did. Then I did the map, then the map looked too obvious. So then I put another panel in between. Then I added 2 panels to the right. And then in April, I changed the red panel and added some more white. And then in May, I think it's finally finished. I'm sitting here with it behind me now. Who knows if it really is finished. Next slide, I think we have one more left.
I think that might be the last one. Yeah.
The last thing I got from, I thought there was a third one. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. The May 30th is what I was going to end with. And that slide kind of shows you other stuff that's going on in the studio. And in terms of how I'm affected in my practice, I'm very upset. I'm an older person with COPD, so I've really been isolated. But I have to say, I have stayed inside until George Floyd, and I couldn't help myself. I'm a political activist animal, so I was out there carefully. So the other one quick thing I want to mention, I was in a panel last night with eco artists sponsored by Schuylkill Nature Center. And one thing we all agreed upon is how important nature is. How important it is to go outside. Before we started our official meeting, we were talking about that amongst ourselves. Camping is a good thing to do. And I have been blessed. I'm blessed with this incredible studio in Center City, but also with a home in Bucks County where Richard Ryan, my husband, and I spend a lot of time. And that's really been my salvation. So I'm going to end there, 10 minutes.
Diane, thank you. Okay, we'll get back to you after Sarah's presentation. Okay. Sarah, do you want to unmute yourself? And
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
All right.
And just let me know when you, next slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, first I just want to thank Brooke and Abby and everybody at PAFA for inviting me to do this, and thanks everyone who showed up today. And so this is a snapshot of my studio taken just the other day. And since mid-March, like everybody, I've been more or less home in the studio or in my garden or food shopping, or thank goodness I have a dog. I walk the dog. I'm lucky that I work at home and I have what I need and more. I do miss my communities. I do a lot of community work, like the rail park, as Brooke mentioned, and other neighborhood things I work on. And I miss my art family, you know, and going to galleries and museums and talks like this in person. But now everything is happening on Zoom. Let's go to the next slide, please, Brooke. Another view of the studio. This is kind of what you can see behind me, I think, too. So at first, after COVID hit, I was, you know, pretty distracted following the news kind of obsessively. Then eventually I pulled myself away a little and found a rhythm in the studio. All my work is autobiographical, and I work on several paintings at the same time. The three paintings you see here, there's the interior of my living room and kitchen on the right. There's a small painting in the center that's actually me washing my hands. And there's a self-portrait, and there's a large garden painting behind there. So over the years, I've painted my neighborhood, my home, my studio over and over again, sort of chronicling my life in this one particular place. Let's see, we can go to the next slide. So this is a painting, a studio painting from 2019. It's 48 by 72 inches, and it's collage and acrylic. And over the years, I have painted my own paintings back into paintings. And I used to, you know, painstakingly recreate them, but with not as much detail as I might have liked. And in 2016, after I had started altering newspaper photographs of the occupant, the current occupant of the White House, altering photographs of him to express my rage, and I started printing them out on digital rice paper. And I wanted to include that work I was doing in a studio painting, but I definitely didn't want to repaint those images. So I got the idea to print them out really small and put them up on a studio painting as if they were tacked on the wall. And then that led me to do that with my own paintings. So all the paintings on the white wall on the left are paintings, you know, previous paintings or paintings I was working on that are printed out, and then they're affixed with matte medium. These are acrylic paintings. And then sometimes they're painted over because I don't have like a super high quality printer. They're kind of rudimentary, but then I can paint over them, touch them up, make them look right in that particular painting. So I like the sort of super condensed compressedness you get from that by making these large paintings really tiny, get really compressed and get these details. And I like incorporating them into these large paintings. There's drawings on the table that are prints out, some drawings, and then there's even scraps of the rice paper in the sort of debris on the studio floor. We can go to the next painting, next slide. This is a self-portrait from 2019, and it's actually the same pose that I'm in the previous painting. But I think I started the painting, and then I was like trying to figure out what that pose is like, because I kind of just do it by like thinking how it feels where I'm sitting. And then I used a mirror and I made this more larger version. At the same time, I was going back and forth to the painting, the big studio painting. So I'm often doing that, going back and forth with paintings. Yeah, because I work on a lot of things at the same time. And also I only reproduce photographically work I've made myself. I like to know that it's my hand still. So when I reproduce, I often reproduce art by other artists that I collect, but that I make myself painstakingly recreate in my hand. We can go to the next slide. This is from also end of last year. It's spring, summer 2019. Also 4 by 6 feet. And this also has collage in it. A couple of the cats, the yellow one, the white one sitting in front of the yellow wall on the left, and then the orange cat sitting in the flower bed. They are both collaged elements from large paintings of cats, kind of life size or larger, and then they get shrunk down nice and tiny. And the gates to the street from my yard, those were made by a metal artist, but using drawings I had made of my cats and dog at the time. So I used a photographic image to get them right, because I wanted them to be crisp and clear. And then you see in the neighborhood, you can see a little bit of the rail park. You see a little bit of the swings. I can't even find everything.
Oh, over here, right
Oh,
here.
yeah, right, exactly. And
Okay.
and then over here, if you see this sort of, there's a building here that has a Shepherd Fairy mural on it, but I put one of my paintings there instead.
Is that this?
Yes. So that's one of my paintings of the rail park, and I stuck it out there as if it's at the rail park. So, and also everything is in bloom here. That's why it's called spring summer, because it's like what's the dogwood in the spring to the, summer tomatoes and everything in between. So I like mixing up time and everything like that. So, is there one more image? Maybe that's it. Oh yeah, there is one more image. Okay, so this is the only painting I'm showing you that I've made during this time since March. It's called Zoom, and it's me zooming with my own animals. So, it's like the pandemic is serious, it's deadly serious, but I think there are things about how we've had to change the way we live that we can find humor in, and I think Zoom meetings are one of them. On the other hand, there's absolutely nothing funny about the deaths of people of color but at the hands of police. And like everybody, I've been very upset and angry and not knowing what to do, but I don't think it's my place to be leading any protests or anything, but and I have actually not gone to any protests because of COVID. And I don't even see how I could make work about that, at least not for a long time. However, it might, I'm a privileged white person, and I feel like right now my job is to listen and learn and pay attention and educate myself. So this is a recent painting that I finished, and this has collage elements in it. Some of the background behind each of the 5 rectangles have collage elements from previous paintings. And then I wanted,
Sarah, did you give each of, pardon me for interrupting you, did you give each of them a Zoom name? It looks like you gave them.
Yeah, I just have the first names, Sarah. So starting at the upper left, that's Irving, and then to his right, Mango, and then below Gladys, and then to the left is, Julius. So yeah, I did. And I tried to make the yellow, like everybody's talking at once, and I also wanted to mention, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of it, but I am working on a project with the Brodsky Center, where I'm going to be making a handmade paper edition with the Brodsky and Paula, who's here. And so, we're hoping to get back to that soon, and I'm really looking forward to that. And so that's what I've been working on. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Let me stop that. Stop share. Oh, hold on.
Just a reminder to everyone while Brooke gets situated is feel free to put questions for the speakers. I know Brooke has probably a few she's going to ask, but you can put those in the chat or raise your hand in just a few moments.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I actually would love, just looking for, I see Sarah, I'm looking for Diane. Where's Diane in the mix? Oh, there you are. Okay, great. Sorry, there's a lot of people on the screen. Sarah, you said that for when the pandemic closed us in March, there was a period of time where all you could do was watch the news, and I got the sense that what you were saying was that you maybe weren't approaching your easel every day and approaching your practice in the way that you might normally. And Diane, I think you too were talking about that initial period of time in early March. So is there something that you've added to your daily practice to help you be productive in your studio space? that might be practices you've already been involved in, or things that you might be finding out you're doing anew. I find that, I mean, I have a very different role than the two of you, but I actually, and I'm working every day, I actually find that I'm doing something new, which is this silly little meditation app called Calm. And I'm just using it as part of my morning routine now, and I never would have done that before, but I need that moment. Is there anything that you guys are doing other than walking dogs? And
Well, walking, I'm trying to get my 10,000 steps in every day, because I am sort of someone who goes to the gym. I don't know if I'm doing it, Brooke, to help my studio practice as much as I'm doing it just to remain sane. But what I found, which I've never done, this is a new thing. I never listened to podcasts before. And now I do while I walk. It's sort of like when I went to the gym, I had the news on the TV that would keep me on the treadmill. I've been listening to some incredible podcasts. Ezra Klein, The New Yorker, all the NPR ones are wonderful. This American Life. And that's how I'm learning. There's so much going on, and a lot of information is out there that I am soaking in as I'm walking. I don't know if it's helping my studio practice, but I need it.
Yep. Sarah?
Well, I would say that I stopped watching as much news, stopped constantly watching the news. Not that I always want to stay informed. And that I also, I not beat myself up about if I get distracted and pull away from the studio, that's okay, and then go back later. And also maybe keep some smaller works on paper or something going that might be easier to jump in and out of through the distractions.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm like, moving around and playing a lot, but also giving yourself permission as an artist to not feel you have to be productive. I think is a healthy thing. I mean, I showed you what I'm doing during COVID, but it's like a 3-month period of going into the studio, out of the studio, sort of picking up the brush when I want to, making decisions, and then walking away and going for a 10,000 step walk.
Yeah, and a lot of commentators have been saying that to all of us. It's okay right now not to be your productive self. I know that probably everybody on this Zoom call is a productive person, ambitious in life, but it's okay to not do that right now. I have a question from a wonderful painter and colleague at PAFA, Lee Werrell, who's part of the Brodsky Center, Sarah. And she is kind of asking a somewhat similar question, but I want to honor her query since she's the next generation. Has the pandemic affected the way that you practice in any way? Do you find that you're painting more or less?
Well, I would say, hi, Lee. Nice to see you. I know Lee. That I, just kind of what I've said. I was sort of distracted at the beginning, worried about it a little bit, told myself not to beat myself up about it, in and out. And I, finding a rhythm, but, things really changed again after George Floyd's murder and all the protests and all the unrest. And so just trying to keep it going, but.
Yeah, painting less, thinking more.
Walking a lot.
Gardening also.
What did you say, Diane? I missed that.
Gardening also.
Gardening in your country spot. Yeah. Thanks everybody for putting these questions in the chat. I'm going to be addressing them as I can. Happily, there's a lot of artists on the call, and so there are some queries about material and process that I'd love to get into a little bit. This is for you, Diane. There's an acknowledgement that you, to quote Kathy Putnam, made a bold switch to acrylics after a long time of painting in oil. And then Sarah, you mentioned collage. So Kathy's wondering if either of you or both of you would want to speak about how these material swaps and shifts have affected your work and your content.
Well, when Sarah spoke, we have to continue, Sarah, this conversation. This has been wonderful already. I listened into Ann Jadeka yesterday on Brooklyn Rail. You were so lucky to have had her at PAFA. She is just one of the most incredible artists. and human beings. And she talked about her practice and materials, which I was very interested in. And it made me think of you, Sarah, because here she is doing collages, pasting things on differently from you. But what I found so fascinating is I too am pasting stuff on my pieces and have been printing them and putting them on my acrylic paintings with matte medium. So there you go. So I really love that connection between the three of us.
Well, and Jadeka's on our board, by the way. She has an alumni artist position as a board member at PAFA.
You mentioned that.
I worked for many years in egg tempera. People probably know that. And I loved it for many reasons, you know, sort of the luscious color and the flatness. But as my work got bigger, it was harder to keep that medium working on the larger scale. And I had tried acrylics in the 80s and found them to be too plasticky. But then I thought, let me try acrylic again. And I just got some matte medium, and I still use the same dried pigments that I used to making egg tempera. And I started doing some acrylic paintings. And this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. For a while I did both, and I had a couple shows where there were paintings with both mediums, and people didn't even really realize I was making that shift. So then as I got more into making larger paintings and enjoying that, you know, I just stuck with the acrylic. I'm not saying I'll never go back to egg tempera, and then of course the collage wouldn't work with egg tempera. So yeah.
Well, to answer Kathy's question more, the reason I switched in 18 to acrylics is because I didn't know what I was going to do. Remember I said that earlier. And these paintings had to do with water and flow. And I was also doing this lenticular project with another artist, Anna Tass, who collaborated with me on these moving images. And the way we got them to move was by using liquid paints that we were pushing around and using air to move and then making animations out of them. So that led me to a compressor. That led me to horizontally painting, which in my studio right now, there's I still am going back and forth now. And what's really ironic, and I think Kathy might know this, the last 2 paintings of that COVID series are oil again. So I'm mixing everything up like Sarah, and that whole world map series has lots of pigments that I've mixed with medium, and also different materials, beads, acrylic beads. Acrylic is different now than it was way back last century. It's better, and there's just so many things you can do with it. So I'm just into all the mediums at this point.
And it's interesting, you two, because we are having a lot of questions in the chat about materiality and choices and decisions. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm seeing them. And I think we've answered many of them in the conversation. But here's a neat one for you, Diane, from let me just find it, from one of our recent alums. Candace Jensen is wondering if the choice of material is a political act or an apolitical one for you. As an environmental artist, does the polymer-based paint create any conflict for you in your studio?
Unfortunately, they all create a conflict in my studio. And that's one of the problems with caring about the planet. It's hard to care about it on all levels. I mean, I'm someone who has, been to the Arctic and the Antarctic. You could say that's a horrible thing to do in terms of CO2. And I'm challenged that way when people ask me about that. And I give my flip answer, which is a true answer. I haven't eaten meat in 40 years. So I think all of us do what we can, but hey, oil paints are just as bad as acrylics. I mean, Sarah is really the model artist using egg tempera. That is the true eco-friendly material. I thought about that, but I don't have her fortitude. So I think we all make compromises. And I'm just very careful when I used oil paint with what I did with my materials after, how I disposed of things. But actually, I think Golden Paints is or maybe it's Gamblin, I'm not sure who to give the plug to. I know paint companies are looking for ways of creating a more eco-friendly material. But I can't say I'm guilty, I try my best on other fronts, but they're both bad.
I eat meat.
Go ahead.
I eat meat.
Well,
I love it.
I didn't know that in my introduction to both of you, so I wasn't able to include that.
But the egg temper, you're using those powder pigments, which if I'm not polluting the world, I'm polluting myself. So, so then I throw the meat in on top of that too.
Sarah, when you think about the question that was asked of Diane, is there anything that you that resonates with you?
Well, I'm guilty as charged of polluting the earth. Like I think we pretty much all are. I have a car. I hardly use it. I don't know.
we were going to get an electric car before COVID, so.
I'm wondering if anyone has questions outside of the chat. If you'd like to, if you're not a typing person, if you want to raise your hand like this, and Abby or I can call on you. If there are other questions you want to ask, other beyond material and how we're planning our days in our studios and how we're creating the space for focus during this time. Judy, I see you there. You have to unmute yourself, Judy. Hold on.
I asked to unmute you. You have to answer though. I don't have the power anymore.
There you go. Okay.
Hi, Abby. Diane, in that first picture that you had small little containers of paint. What were they?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm here in my studio. This is a bigger.
No.
2-ounce little plastic containers, those.
What are those?
I keep painting them so they don't dry out.
Ah, okay.
For artists, I used to get them on 9th Street in a party supply store. I'm looking to see if I have, oh, here they are, here. This is what you meant, these little containers?
No, they were tall, maybe 3 inches tall and round, like canisters, like what Elizabeth Osborne. Yeah, right there.
These? You mean?
Diane, I have it on the screen.
But I don't, do you mean the forefront? Those are all,
Yeah.
Oh, those are pigments. Those are powder pigments and all.
Powder pigments. Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole table full of stuff. Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
I have a question in the chat. Let me just get to it again. Sarah, could you speak to some of the artists who have influenced your work?
Sure.
This is a question from Sharon Pomerantz.
Okay. There's a lot of artists that I love and have influenced me. Looking down at some of the books, I have Frida Kahlo, David Hockney, Florine Stettheimer, who I only learned about when I became a student at PAFA. Huh. Horace Pippin, same. I didn't know Horace Pippin until I came to PAFA. Joan Nelson. No, wait, I'm Joan Brown. I do like Joan Nelson, but Joan Brown. Mm-hmm. So those are just a few names that come to mind. It's hard to have them right.
And I'm not sure if our curator of contemporary art was able to join us this morning, but Joan Brown is an artist that she's spent a lot of work, a lot of her career working on, and we've added a nice representation of Joan Brown into our permanent collection.
Yeah, it's, I've painted, not only do I paint art that I collect from friends and fellow artists, swaps, and but I've also painted into my paintings works that I covet of artists. So I've painted Joan Brown as if I have a painting of hers in my living room. I've repainted her paintings. Follow lots of people.
Yeah, and when you say that you learned of Horace Pippin and Stettheimer, did that happen at PAFA? Because they're well represented in our collection.
Yes, that happened when I was a student. And when you're a student at PAFA, you have free reign of the museum, and you can go into the museum at any time. And that's where I saw that yellow Picnic at Bedford Hills painting of Florine Stettheimer, which is just stunning, and learned about her. And I don't think I knew about Horace Pippin as a kid growing up in the suburbs of New York. but when I came to Philadelphia, I learned about him.
Right, and of course he was active in Chester County, right here. So, and I think Abby, just for anybody's interest, is posting links, if I'm watching you, Abby, to those artists that we're talking about. And I think especially the links that are PAFA connected, so you all can experience our collection in more depth. Is there any other thoughts? We're getting close to the end of our coffee time this morning. Yes, Mary Hamill. Mary, you will want to request to be unmuted.
I wanted to ask Diane to elaborate a little on her decision to include text right on the painting itself.
Well, I just felt it was necessary. I thought those 3 paintings were too placid after I had just finished my summer heat painting. I think I'm getting a little bit more angry and more anxious as I get older. And I keep trying to find new ways to meld my political awareness, activism with my art person and, you know, make it whole. And that was necessary. Certainly in this COVID painting, I mean, I got the map and I have the curve, but then I've tried to integrate it into art. Because in the end, I'm what I like to call myself a subversive artist. So I believe in beauty, so I want people to be attracted to the work. I paint large, as I think you know, because I want you to be enveloped and look at it close up and further away. But then I want the viewer to, you know, see something else as they linger, if indeed they do, and not just take a selfie. So there are messages there. And that one is just right out front.
We'll take another question from Joan, and then I think we'll move on, but to just a closure, or kind of closure. But Joan, are you unmuted? Yes.
Yes, so this is really directed at Diane. So, you know, a couple of times you referenced changing a recent painting because it was too literal. And I really feel as though in your very early work, really that was all about being kind of hyper literal. It was so vividly precise, and, you know, it was just really literal. And I mean, I've loved the way your whole career has moved and the way your dedication moved it. But talk about the abstraction involved in what you're doing.
Well, I would argue that there's always been abstraction in my work, and I would argue that I haven't been a literal painter. I never was a super real painter.
No.
And I think I chose the landscape, you know, at a school when you paint this portrait and you paint everything. For me, the landscape allowed me to still be, I thought, an abstract painter, because I could still move things around. You know, I grew up in the 70s. My art school training were with people who still loved abstract expressionism, and all men, I should say. So for me, I think I don't really separate realism and abstraction. Look at Sarah's work. You say it's real, but it's abstract. I mean, it all melds together. But messages, you know, when I started working on climate change, I was using data signals. I was using signifiers that some people saw. I mean, literal. I mean, when I did that heat painting, I actually had the kangaroo them up because it was such an iconic image of Australia burning. So I guess I'm taking from different places, just like Sarah does. I think we as artists use what we need to make our work, you know, but it's always been abstract.
It's always been abstract, but now it's got a degree of freedom, yes. And yet it's very precise. So, I mean, it tells a very specific story, but it's so much more free, it seems to me.
You know, Joan, I think that's you could also describe Sarah's work that way, that it has a literal quality, but is also very free and abstract. And there's a real connective tissue between you two. I hope you do continue the conversation between the two of you, and I'd like to be sandwiched in the middle so that I could learn from you both. It is always such an honor to have an opportunity to go into an artist's studio. All of my museum colleagues on this call know that it's one of the real perks of being in this business is getting to go to meet with an artist in their studio, better understand what it is they're tackling and trying to say. And we learned a little bit more this morning from both you, Diane, and Sarah. Let's continue the conversation. Please come back, everyone, to future Cultures and Coffees. Abby and I have been working on a program with the Brandywine Workshop and Alan Edmonds, and also the Ryman family, so that we can talk about our Robert Ryman Philadelphia prototype that's always on view at PAFA, and perhaps our best kept secret. And more programs to come as we enter into the summer season. So please keep in touch with us.